evening. So I'll do the roll call real quick. We have 4 council present. John James won't be with us this evening. And just a process related thing before we go ahead and get started. I am the chair of the council this year. Jeff is our vice chair, and we kind of have an agreement going for the next year. We're going to kind of swap on and off in terms of running meetings to give Jeff some experience running meetings. So this will be day 1 for Jeff running the meeting. So we're going to make it to the big to-do and switch seats and stuff so that he can run the show for the rest of the evening. And we're switching seats mostly just so like if anybody watches the recording, they're not like, what the heck is going on? No. Right, thank you.
We need to identify who we are, roll call wise.
I know, I think we're okay.
All right. First order of business would be to approve the minutes for the town council meeting of November 15th, 2022.
Mr. Vice Chair, motion to, well, actually, first of all, does anyone have any edits? Motion to approve the minutes from November 15th, 2022 as written. Second.
All right, any discussion? How do I say it? Guess we'll take the vote. Melissa?
I'm sorry, what are we voting on?
We're voting on the minutes for our last meeting of November 15th, 2022.
Yes, approved.
Jess?
Aye.
Mallory?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 4-0. Next, the signing of the treasurer's warrant.
Mr. Vice Chair, motion to sign treasurer's warrant dated November 17th, 2022 in the amount of $76,945.44. Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion?
I just have a question, like timing wise, because we just did one, because the one from last week was really from the week before. Is that
So
right?
the one last week was for 3 weeks. This
Got it.
was only for 1 week.
Short week. Okay, thank you.
Great, anything else? We'll call the vote. Melissa?
Aye. Yes.
Jess?
Aye.
Mallory?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 4-0. Next up are reports and correspondence. We have Representative Tiffany Roberts and Representative Michelle Meyer here to talk with us about just our annual checkup. I guess I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. I'm gonna stay seated if that's okay. We've been rolling around in these chairs. Representative Tiffany.
Yeah, could you just identify yourself?
Yep,
so we get to-
Representative Tiffany Roberts. I live in South Berwick, represent parts of North Berwick and South Berwick.
And I'm Representative Michelle Meyer. I live in Elliott. I serve the people of District 150, which is all of Elliott and parts of Kittery and South Berwick.
So we're here tonight kind of as some of you who have been on know we try to do this once a year, you know, depending on health conditions and everything else. This is kind of our scheduled face time with you all to bring forth any questions, concerns, ideas that you may have. If you remember a couple of years ago, former Councilor Kemble had brought forth some ideas around marijuana legislation that we put in. So this is really kind of a time that we like to set aside for you to talk to us. Of course, we're open at any time. I know that Town Manager Collar and I have been corresponding about various issues. So I don't know where you want to start, if at all, or if you feel like things have been addressed or.
I can jump in. One thing that I guess I'd like to bring up, and I'm sure Tim has probably filled you in on this, and I can't remember the name of the bill, but the tax.
LP 290.
Thank you. I think that's something where we really felt the impact of that. I think, so just as bills like that come forward, which like the intention there is really great, but there's a lot that wasn't accounted for in terms of like what does that mean for the municipality and the work involved in that? So that's just like, I guess, feedback for anything similar, go forward.
And we're hearing a lot of that.
Yeah.
So what we can report back right now is that there's more than one piece of legislation being crafted to address the various concerns from Maine Revenue Services and from the municipalities. We don't know what's all in those yet, because the conversations are still being had. We have until December 16th to submit legislation. So stay tuned. I can update you or Representative Meyer can when something gets put in, and even then, I'm sure for those of you who follow, what gets put in isn't always what comes out. So we're aware of the issues around it, and we're on it.
The concerns raised here by your town manager are exactly the same concerns I've heard from the folks in Kittery and the folks in Elliott. As soon as we see the legislation that's been submitted, certainly would be happy for your feedback to make sure it's addressing the concerns that you're experiencing here. And then invite you to testify when there are public hearings and add your voice and your experience here in town with what you're seeing as far as amendments to that we expect.
And that's important for us. And I'm sure that I've mentioned it to some of you before, is, we have our public hearings up there, but if you all who are actually feeling the impact of this at home don't show up to tell the greater committee and the greater legislature, then it's like, it kind of can fall flat sometimes, so.
Are you all still doing like Zoom for the public hearings, and so people can join remotely for that kind of stuff?
We're not sure
Okay.
what it's gonna, how it's gonna lay out in the next legislature.
Uh-huh.
We're waiting on
Okay.
new joint rules for how it will look. I've
Mhm.
heard some rumors that there'll be a hybrid
Mhm.
situation for the next legislature, but we're not sure right now.
Okay.
But if you submit written testimony, it gets read by the committee.
Okay.
I can guarantee you. So your voice and your experience, what you see and what you'd like to see is really important to us.
Twice a year, if I may.
Yeah, absolutely.
So to help bring Melissa up to speed. So earlier this year, the state passed two bills. One is LD 2003, which allows, it was put in under Affordable Housing Act, where basically the overall of the bill is in all towns and cities in the state of Maine, you can subdivide your properties with livable space and build a second. If you have a small lot that by zoning is only allowing one residential building, and you meet this right criteria, you can now subdivide that lot and put a second building on it. So that was the first one. And that was the issue for us, is we already have zoning and we already have the stuff. And if you start building, so you take somebody on Young Street and they build a 2-car garage on this driveway, and then they put an in-law apartment over that and attach it to water and sewer. Well, that's great, but can that small residential neighborhood handle if
Right.
everybody starts doing that?
Yep.
That was the first bill that we had. And oftentimes, the issues, and it seems lately, especially with LD 2003, they did it, and LD 290. The bills are coming out of the legislature, coming from the state to the municipalities without like finished guidance. There's, all the questions haven't been answered, so we're going, well, what about? And we got nothing. So I would ask you folks that when you get up there, make sure that someone is, I have to do that for the council. When I present an issue to them to sign or purchase or do something, I have to make sure that I have all the facts and details so they can make an educated decision. So I'm not sure how this is ending up down in our laps if you folks haven't been given all the right information, And I just, my point of contention for you folks is to fight for that, so that have you worked out all the scope of how this will affect the municipalities and how they're gonna deal and handle with that? Because it's easy for them to pass bills, not you folks, but they pass at the state level generically. And then we're left at trying to handle it, decipher what's this, what's that, what do we do with this, how do we make this? So part of LD 2003, they after the fact said, well, we'll give you grant funding to have experts come in to look at your zoning land use ordinances, because they all gotta get adjusted, and that takes a process and a time. And now they're figuring out that they haven't got the grant funding in place yet, so now they're like, oh, and this is supposed to take effect July 1st.
Right.
So now take that same guy who builds this garage, and he turns 65 years old, and we have LD 290, and if he's lived there 10 years, he can come in and he can apply to freeze his taxes at this year's rate. So he freezes his taxes hypothetically $3,000 at this year's rate, right? And then he says, that's great, I'm 65 years old. Then he goes out next year and he builds this new 2-car garage and with an in-law apartment. The problem is, he's allowed to do that under this new LD 2003 law. He builds this building, there's all this new value, but LD 290 says I gotta freeze his taxes if he reapplies at the 2021, 22 rate. So how do we capture that new value? Because if I can't capture that new value, and assuming that the taxes stay level or go up a little bit, then that burden is placed on every taxpayer in the town of South Berwick under 65 years old. And that's discriminatory, right? Because it's discriminatory by age at that point. So these are the things that I'm communicating to you. Becomes very frustrating to us, because if you ran that formula around 20 years, you're gonna break the bank. You'll break our bank, you'll break the state's bank. You know, if we can't capture new growth, and everybody's an aging population and moving up, and everybody at 65, and all new growth, I can't capture it.
Right.
I don't have a funding for it. So that's what we're talking about. I just wanted to brief you, make sure you,
Yep.
we're up to speed. So those are the two bills that primarily are in my bonnet right now. That's giving me the bees.
Gotcha.
Mr. Vice Chair.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Just to back up a second, so an update on 2003. Representative Meyer and I have met with SMPDC
Mhm.
and a bunch of planners. So the committee that I sit as chair of has jurisdiction over the Department of Economic and Community Development, who has been tasked with the rulemaking, which is what comes after the bill's passed. Unfortunately, it doesn't always come before, it comes after
Right.
the rulemaking and the grant kind of standing up. I received an update last week that they've just hired on 2 people. They have interim guidance and we understand that interim guidance can't necessarily be used to create ordinances. That's not lost on us at all. So they have not started rulemaking yet, and they're beginning to stand up the grant. So Representative Meyer and myself understand that there is talk in communities that you need more time.
Right.
And that's what we're working on literally today, as we
Yeah.
speak, is an extension on that July 1st.
Yeah.
So that's
okay.
kind of where that stands.
So, and that's the stuff that, so, and I do appreciate your folks, both Michelle and Tiffany working and hearing our needs, because it has put a burden for us, we're scrambling. I mean, there's, even though our town meeting is May, and I know some smaller towns have town meetings in March, we're just now putting together a land use committee to review the land use ordinance. And of course, as you know, and for you folks, the land use ordinance for us is huge, right? It doesn't attach just one thing. It attaches electrical, plumbing, it hits, so the land use hits a variety of issues. So we can't go in and go, okay, we're just gonna change this page and not have it affect page 20 and page 3, and who looks at that, so we don't end up in a quagmire. So just, it's not an easy task to just mold something into it, that's all.
Anyone else? No?
Do you guys have any sense of revenue sharing for the coming year? Yeah. Is it too early? Congratulations,
Thank you.
Thank you.
both of you. Glad to have you back.
Excellent. I don't have anything else. Great. Thank you very much for coming in. We appreciate what you're
And
doing.
our emails are, phones are always there.
Absolutely. Reach out, questions, concerns,
Yeah.
as we move along.
Yeah, and if you just keep me updated, I'll keep the council updated. And, I do appreciate, Tiffany's called my phone a couple, 3-4 times. Michelle, I'll give you my number, any updates, we're always appreciative, because it, helps me guide, along with 100 other things that we've got on our moving agendas. It helps us prioritize, okay, well, if they haven't got the ruling stuff done yet for 2003, and you think we're gonna get an extension, we can kind of back that off a little bit, and we're moving some of the other pieces to the top, you know. So,
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
For
coming.
having us.
Yes.
On to the next. Item number 2 under reports and correspondence is TIF tax increment financing districts. That is,
Mr. Vice Chair, the Economic Community Developer is going to present. She has been working since she started in early September on updating the current TIF district and working to create a new TIF district. And the step process legally, we have to do, the next step is she's put the process together, packaged together. She's got it tentatively at the lawyer's office. It's come out of there and been reviewed and approved, tentatively approved. So her next spot is to come in tonight and give you a presentation on what she's built and how it's gonna work, and kind of give you the overview on that.
If I can get my screen shared. Great. Thank you, Chair Cook and Vice Chair Minahan, Tim and Jen, and everybody here for allowing me to present where we're at. I've been working on this, but I want to share with you that it's a collaborative process. I met with all of the department heads to ascertain what they were looking at, what they needed in the short term and long term. And so everything that we've done so far has been a collaborative effort. My role is, as I tell people, I'm the point guard for economic development, but economic development requires everybody as part of it. So is my screen shared? You have to say share my screen.
And your screen is black.
It's black. Well, once she shares the shit,
It's just showing.
Mhm.
she doesn't need to have her video on, unless you want to have your video on to me.
It's on. Share screen. All right. Is it working?
Yep.
Yep.
Slideshow. All right. Minimize this here so it's not in your way. So
Thanks.
what we're going to be talking about this evening is one of the things, you have a really great program at Punkintown. And so that said, it needed to be made more comprehensive. So while we were trying to work on creating a new TIF district, we're going to basically replicate the same development program. And we'll talk about what that means and what that looks like for the new TIF district, but also to create the same amendment for Punkintown. So those same types of expenses can be paid out of both instead of just one. So the agenda for this evening, we'll talk about what TIF districts are. For some of you folks, it's a repeat part of the slide presentation. For others, it's new, but it doesn't hurt for us to all have a refresher. It took me years to finally master this. So for you folks to master it in 2 or 3 meetings it's probably doubtful. But anyway, so the tax shift benefits, we'll talk about what that does for South Berwick. We'll talk about the analysis and the progress to date and what the recommendations from after meeting with Tim and Jen, what we're thinking. We'll talk about the Punkintown amendment, and we'll talk about the new transit-oriented TIF district, which is going to encompass the entire area of Route 236. We'll talk about the development program overview, and we'd like to get council feedback, timeline, and direction moving forward. So just real quickly, without really reading the slide over, it's really a great tool to catalyze economic development. It allows municipalities to shelter increases for up to 30 years. It doesn't mean you have to have a TIF district for 30 years, but it's recommended. And to avoid losses due to state and county fiscal formulas. TIF revenue can fund infrastructure enhancements for project development and or project costs. And then if you have a comprehensive development program, it'll fund many municipal projects to enhance economic development climate. What I didn't write here also is it can also absorb some of your general fund expenditures that are related to economic development. That said, the development program needs to meet statutory requirements, and it has to meet and be passed at the local level, which is where you folks come in as
for approving it. So the geographic boundary is very critical, and it can be defined, it can be project specific. For example, Pumpkin Town was just one small area. Transit will be a larger, and some communities have written them specifically for one specific business that's coming to the area. Each district has to have an original assessed value called an OAV. So what that basically means is the assessor creates a certificate that creates the original assessed value of all the properties in that particular year. So for the transit oriented, for example, when we get to that, that would be as of April 1 of last year. The other one, Pumpkin Town, I can't remember the year, I think it was 2000, is it 2008?
Well,
2000. Well,
So,
12 to 10-ish years.
yeah, so you've been about 18 years left on it. So then the development program is the project initiative list, and it's created and managed locally. The applications are reviewed for statutory compliance. This particular one will go to DECD. If you had an affordable housing TIF, that would go through the Maine State Housing Authority. So there are 4 different types of TIF districts. The downtown TIF is specifically for a downtown and requires a downtown revitalization plan. So you just can't create a downtown district unless you have a plan that needs to be implemented. The neat part of the downtown is it has no assessment caps and no acreage caps. And you'll see later when we talk about both of those caps. Transit-oriented TIF districts also don't have assessment or acreage caps. Whoops.
We lost all our screens now.
maybe that one has to be on.
maybe it's when she's changing her screen. Sorry, I just
No
kept
worries.
flickering. I thought it was.
Okay.
And the other thing about transit-oriented TIF districts is they must have to be on a public transportation route. So you can't just create one like, let's say, along Route 4 when there's no public transportation. 236 has the coast bus schedule. Doesn't matter how many runs, doesn't matter where it's going and who are the riders, as long as it has ridership and a schedule. So the omnibus are general tax increment financing districts. They can be small or large, but they do have acreage and assessment caps. And the last one is an affordable housing TIF. Sorry, it's so small.
Are we off the meeting?
Yeah, Barbara, can you still see like us on that screen? I think we're okay, because it says Talking Owl Labs.
You know, it says join with meeting ID though.
Yeah, I think,
Okay.
yeah, I think we're okay. And we have here, your slides.
Yeah.
Right.
And then because you're sharing your screen, it should show up well for the recording. So it's okay that it's a little small. Sorry for you all in the room.
The other part of tax increment financing districts is they assist in achieving economic development goals of a comp plan or any other planning or vision plans. They attract new investment, jobs, and improve local economy, accomplish significant infrastructure projects, and most importantly, you'll see for South Berwick why that is, the tax shift benefits. So this is just an illustrative example of what happens. So the blue bar at the bottom is the base value of a project, the base value of what the property is assessed at. If there are improvements to that property or growth of any kind, in this case, they put in 5 million, the valuation goes up, but for the 30 years, all the new valuation and the tax revenue generated gets kept locally. It doesn't get to the state, it doesn't get to increase county taxes and all of that. At the end of the 30 years, the full $6 million and the full $6 million value of that, the revenue generated, will now go back entirely to the general fund. I just very much want to iterate and have you understand that you will not lose the base value. A lot of people say, we don't want it in a TIF, we're not going to get the money. You already have the money, it's going into your general fund. All the tax increment financing is grabbing the increment, grabbing the new growth. So, so the municipality determines the percent of the new valuation you want to put in. Recommendation is always to put in 100, it's consistent, but you could only grab 50% and let 50% go to the general fund. That's an option that you have. You don't have to make that decision when you approve the TIF district. That can get made on an annual basis or a 10-year basis. It's not recommended to fluctuate because it's harder for finance folks to actually understand what they have for the general fund budget and the TIF budget. So sheltered revenues really could support municipal expenditures made necessary by economic development or incentivize private investment. So the incentivizing are things that known as credit enhancement agreements. So if you see the buzzword CEA, that's what that is. But most people assume that a TIF district is created specifically for a business. That's not the case. The TIF is the TIF. The credit enhancement agreement is the agreement you make if you have a major employer coming into town. The valuation cap, per the statute, municipalities' valuation in a TIF district has to be capped at 5%. And no more than 2% valuation may be in one district. So your total cumulative of all the TIF districts, with the exception of downtown and transit, those have no caps, have to be limited to that. Then the South Berwick Punkintown Road and CMP corridor has grown from 3.8 million to 26 million. So that total growth, and I think, Jen, we had talked that it was closer to like about 400,000 that you're bringing in every year, that otherwise would be gone, you know, to the state, 70% of that. So that translates in that particular small district, a growth of 23 million in the last 12 years. So this is just a recap that you're going to see on the official application. The total municipal acreage is 19,847. Your existing acreage right now is 194. There's nothing in the downtown because you don't have one. And so the total acreage is 194. You're only at 0.98. So you have room to add more TIF districts.
So we have 4%.
Correct.
Zero.
Correct. So what are the impacts? Tax shift, how do we keep it local? Based on the current essential programs and services funding model, state aid is impacted by the TIFs. The statewide mill rate is applied to your state valuation for property taxes for education. So the higher your valuation in your community, the more funds you need to raise locally. So in essence, you're losing the money. And based for municipal revenue sharing, same thing, based on population, taxes raised, and state valuation, the higher your valuation, less money revenue sharing you get back to your community. Also, when it comes to county taxes paid by municipality, based on your percentage share of the county's state valuation, the higher your share valuation, the higher your county taxes. So the key is running a tax shift calculation. And that's where when I first arrived here, well, before I arrived here, when we had the TIF presentation, we had Shauna Cook Mueller run the tax shifts through Bernstein Sure. And did you know that South Berwick, for every tax dollar generated, 69 cents of each does not stay local? So it makes you one of the communities that has the highest, what I call seepage loss from this community. 43% of that 69 cents is lost due to the reduction in state aid to education. 3% of those lost tax dollars is due to an increase in county taxes. 16% is due to a reduction in revenue sharing from the state. And 4% is lost to additional local education budget. And because you lose almost 70%, it takes 2/3 more tax revenue from the general fund to fund TIF eligible projects, operations, and salaries. So here's our cute little diagram here to show you. It basically shows you the same thing. You take a dollar bill, you rip it, you basically 2/3 of your bill is gone. You have 1/3 kept locally. So that's an ouch for South Berwick. I mean, many communities that engage in TIF districts, if you get 50 cents, 40 cents, even 35 cents back, that's awesome. The fact that you would get 70 cents back is, I don't know of any other community actually that has it that high, but I guess I'd have to ask that question. So, so what we did so far, we reviewed the Punkintown district map and the development program. 18 years remain in the TIF district. What are the recommendations after talking with folks is to leave the parcels in the district intact because there are 18 years remaining. The other ones could actually go in districts that would go the full 30. And the other part is we can expand the development program to cover more expenditures. So you have a decent balance, a little over $1 million. And so not only are you growing by 400,000 a year, you have money in the bank that can be spent on some programs that you can actually put in. So the goal here during this budget process is to work with Tim and Jen to see how much of the general fund that we can actually shift from the general fund into the TIF budget. We could earmark Punkintown fund balance for costly projects. You may be needing a traffic signal, for example. And so you may be able to get a grant match out of the TIF district and money from the state and fund a project that actually would not have to go to bond or have to go back to the taxpayers. because you have the funding. So what have we done so far? We've created the Pumpkin Town Amendment for the Development Program. As Tim said, it's at the Attorney's Office and being finalized. We have also explored other TIF districts, the transit, which we'll talk about, the downtown TIF, and the Omnibus Economic Development TIF District. We created the new TIF District Development Projects and Initiatives Development Program to use for all of them. And we created a transit-oriented TIF district map and assessor parcel data. And we did create a downtown TIF map and assessor parcel data. But we're gonna have to wait until there's a downtown redevelopment or revitalization plan in order to have that happen. But to be continued. So the goal is to amend the Pumpkin Town TIF district upon your approval in December, and to create a transit-oriented TIF district along Route 236 in December 2022 upon your approval. And then to create a downtown revitalization plan, hopefully by March of 2023, to set the framework for next year's development of a downtown TIF district. Pumpkin Town District Amendment will be to expand it, as we said, create the development program to mirror the transit-oriented and to cover shifted general fund expenses. And the question for you this evening, and just some feedback, do we want to consider rename, we don't have to come up with a name till the public hearing, rename the TIF district to make it more marketable? Because we think Pumpkin Town, and people that don't know what Pumpkin Town is, they question that. So that's always something you want to be considering.
So,
Go ahead.
sorry, I'm like laughing at that because I was gonna interject earlier and say, like, as part of this, can we change the name? Because I hate that it's pumpkin, like it's just. You can tell where I stand on that.
Yeah, well, it's, when somebody asks, calls and asks me, what do you have for TIF districts? And I want to build, Pumpkin Town, and what's Pumpkin Town, what's the advantage? And so if you say, business park district or, whatever, economic development,
Industrial.
doesn't matter. Yeah, we gotta think,
Something a little more
Pumpkin
descriptive.
Town Industrial Park. It doesn't, the Pumpkin Town word doesn't, is not the problem. The problem is it's isolated. And what is it? Sounds like a Halloween dungeon, right? No, just kidding. Thanksgiving.
Poorly spelled word.
Something out of Deliverance.
Yes, thank
There you
you.
go. I wasn't going there, but, so the new transit-oriented TIF district on Route 236, to create one along the entire corridor. Keep in mind that the reason we're doing that is because there aren't any acreage or valuation caps. So even if it grows slowly and methodically, like only 300,000 a year, it adds up, right? You're not losing 200 of that every year. So, and you're able to do so because it's public transportation. You cannot create a transit TIF district in an area that doesn't have public. What's good about 236 is prime for development, prime for growth, prime for the development program to really help. It would, here's the neat thing about it, the boundaries, and this is probably TMI, you can only go 500 feet linear from the route of transportation. Here's the cool thing, it includes 100% of your downtown, right? Except for the expanded sections. So you can still start revitalizing your downtown. You can still do a downtown facade program in advance of a marketing plan. You can still do loans and grants or anything you would like to decide to do during your next year's budget process without having the full revitalization plan, replacing planters, flags, those sorts of things. So that, go ahead.
Sorry, question on that. So basically what you're saying is the transit TIF district that you're proposing with the 500-foot buffer includes the downtown. Does that mean that, for future, if we then were to establish a downtown TIF district, like, can you have a parcel be in both?
Great question.
Okay.
You're like way ahead. That's awesome.
Right.
So here's the cool thing. The one that would be the downtown would be actually perpendicular to 236 and go and include all the way out to the outlook and to the golf course, and also go all the way to the river. And so the two can bisect each other, but the original TIF district where the 500 linear feet is must remain in the original. Okay, and
Okay.
so then you just don't use that assessment. So the OAV remains for those in the original district, and you just capture the ones and it can overlap. So it's like an overlay.
So it would be like the other TIF district, the downtown one that we're sort of talking, the hypothetical one that we're talking about would be sort of like that chunk of property less the 500.
That's correct.
Got it. Okay.
In that section.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Great question. So the other part is that, you know, the Route 236 benefits all of South Berwick, not just 236. You know, you write a very comprehensive development program. You can use it for signals outside of that district. You can use it for downtown programs. And so again, I talked about the comprehensive development program. So this is a tiny, tiny map that was the part, and then this was hot off the press, and I will include that in the updated presentation. Maybe they can put it online. So you have that, the version here. Did anybody else want to see this? You want to look at that? Or, so that one actually shows the entire TIF district and the corridor, and it's very, you can see how much property is actually in the district and how much it grabs. The other piece, you'll say, well, some of these look, you know, geographically larger than 500 feet. The one thing I neglected to mention until now is that the 500 feet is strict in the sense the lot has to be in there. But if the 500 feet starts grabbing one that's 1,500 feet long, doesn't matter, you can take the whole 1,500 feet.
Oh, so once it cuts in.
Exactly. So like, for example, you know, there's a probably like we were looking at the fire station today when Jen pointed that out, where I was just wanting to make sure that the fire station was included. So the fire station is the property starts before the 500 ends, but the entire lot is way beyond the 500. So it's in it. So you'll see pieces like that that kind of look a little bit longer, but you're just kind of grabbing.
So any lots that are in the 500.
Right. And before I get to the development program overview, I did want to let you know too, when you have a large TIF district like this, the lawyers recommend, and I've done it in a couple other communities, to meet with the state, the person who runs the TIF programs, before you just throw in the application. So you want to get buy-in, right? And so we have done that. So we met with Tina Mullins, and so she's basically the second in command to the commissioner in the sense of, she's not the second in command, but as far as TIF goes, she's the next one down. And so she reviewed that with our attorneys and made sure that the maps qualified, that any of our development program items were qualifiable expenses. So far, this is what we have. This is the overview. Economic community development, salary and operations, which right now is currently 100% funded out of the Punkintown district. You can provide business support. We're not doing it yet, but you can actually prorate salaries for the manager, people in finance, planning and assessing based on how much they're doing in economic development. You determine a formula. It can fund economic development and planning studies. For example, it's funding comp plans. If you want to do a market analysis, we want to do a downtown revitalization plan, can be paid out of this. It can fund economic development organizations. You know, if there are separate EDAs or EDCs, we can do that. Oops, there's my fun arrows. Sorry, we gotta tolerate that. So downtown facade improvement program has been very successful in communities. You can decide to determine how much you want to give. We've seen 50-50 matching programs where you say 20,000 or 30,000 the max, we will give you 15, but you must invest a minimum of 15. Win-win for the community. You have a $30,000 investment in your downtown. It costs the city 15 and it costs the business owner 15. We can offer business grants, loans and incentives. Do all sidewalks and connectivity within the district, also connecting to the district. For example, certain streets, if there's a sidewalk project planned for in the capital program, but it's not part of the district, so long as it connects to an economic development hub, you can actually pay for that because you're connecting residents to the downtown. You can do portions of roads and paving, intersection signalization projects, wayfinding and signage. And wayfinding, the difference between that is signs, but wayfinding is kind of like pointing people to different areas, like the hoop signs you see in some communities that say beaches here, shopping, downtown, parks, post office, that sort of thing. All right, infrastructure improvements, catch basin improvements, drainage, those sorts of things. Can't do it in a residential development, but it can do it in the downtown or some of the feeder streets. Streetscapes are, like I talked about, planters, flags, benches, public safety equipment. It's what's really good. You can cover prorated portions of fire equipment. Not to be confused, it can't fund police, but anything with fire, ambulance, and facilities. And a grant match. And I just realized I did infrastructure twice, so I guess I need to flip that. You can do marketing for business development. Pay for parking modifications and improvements. trails, bike lanes and bridges, stormwater and drainage, and GIS and mapping. So we're at the point where I am done my presentation and talking. And I'm here for council feedback, talk about the timeline and the direction moving forward. So I guess I should probably talk about the timeline before. So the goal is on the 13th, we will have the full packet of the application, what it looks at. So you have that for, the public will have it. It'll be the public hearing. Hopefully you'll approve the motion this evening, the motions this evening to set your public hearing. Public hearing on the 27th. It's highly recommended that the approval for the TIF districts upon hearing what the public says is the motion then would be to approve that evening and incorporate any feedback. So you can still make changes. And then we go to the state in January and hopefully have it approved by mid-February so we can know what we need to do from a budgetary standpoint. And that is the reason for putting the timeline as tight as we are right now. So.
That was a question that I was gonna have around. I sort of was like thinking scheduling these public hearings 2 days after Christmas is sort of a funny date just in terms of like availability and stuff, but I figured there was a rationale around the timeline and there was logic and stuff around it. So basically we want to squeeze everything in so that we can have all of the information that we need going into the budget cycle.
And so when you have a public hearing, and I'm going to verify this, but I believe that the public can provide written comment on this, and so they're going to have, everybody's going to have this by the 13th. Actually, they have it on the 13th. You will have had it 3 or 4 days before, and then the publication hearing ad goes in like for the 9th or whenever it's published, for the packet will have to be completely ready and physically visible for the public to come in and look at it and read it.
So they have to vote to approve the application on the 13th meeting, correct?
The application, no, that would be on the 27th after the public hearing.
Okay,
The 13th is more a point of information. This is what you're going to be voting on. This is what the public has to speak on. That's correct. No action on the 13th, other than I'll come back and go walk you through the application so you understand what that's all about and the development program. Because it's a pretty wieldy document. When you look at it, you're like, 3 million for this, but we had to come up with a placeholder number for 30 years. How much are you going to spend on economic development? Well, 100,000 times 30 years. That's how you get your number. So the money kind of looks ominous, like you look at it going, gulp, but it just means that's a placeholder. You will never raise that much money, trust me. So,
And in these applications, jump back here, the different items that you listed off, stormwater, drainage, basically, like all the things, I guess, that are, we could spend that money on. Are we sort of taking the approach of like, let's include everything and then we'll sort of have
yes,
lots of options, whereas I know our existing Pumpkin Town TIF is very restrictive
mhm.
in terms of,
Mhm.
okay.
So here's the neat thing about the development program. If you do what I call the menu approach, like you're going to be looking at, you don't have to go back to the well.
Mhm.
There's no more $2,000 or $3,000 lawyer fee to go back to Augusta, add 2 more items if you think it's a good idea.
Mhm.
And then because you have to have another public hearing, you have to present it all over again. And I think the comprehensive one is now becoming a tool so much that when I meet with folks in Augusta, they're like, can you sharpen the language? I kind of chuckle because I said, that's the same language that was in Yarmouth, the same language that was in Saco, but now we're in South Berwick and there's more eagle eyes and they're understanding that they want it a little bit more cleaned up and buttoned up, so.
So I just wanted to go back to the acreage or the municipality's valuation. No, it was something about acreage and we were let at 1%. Is that what I was reading?
Mhm.
So this seems like a much.
There's
what
no
would this-
cap on this type
Okay,
of
gotcha.
TIF, right?
That's right.
Okay.
Downtowns and transit. Grab all you can because it's all in there. If you were losing just 30 cents on a dollar, I'd say, why are we doing this? I mean, it's beneficial, but it's the flip for you folks. You're losing 70 cents on a dollar. You want to keep it local. And the other part is, the state looks, scrutinizes the size of these districts because that's revenue they're not getting, correct? Right, or having, so, yeah.
So sorry to piggyback off of that. So we're currently with Pumpkin Town, we're currently at the almost 1%. So if we, in the future, if we consider downtown TIF, that's where the additional 4% starts to come.
In the
like, there's a
downtown,
cap.
you still won't have a cap. So.
Oh, we still don't have.
So
cap.
in other words, if you do a downtown and you approve this transit, those don't have any caps. It gives you another 4% to grab along
Somewhere
further
else.
in from 236, for example. Like some of these lots, they want to put a business park on vacant land that's landlocked, but we are able to negotiate an easement and put in a new business park way off of 236. And it gives us that opportunity to create a TIF district there. And now cap count till the cap.
Yeah, so Vice Chair. So there's a lot of 25-cent words in this presentation with, without insulting anybody's intelligence. I feel like when it's presented, I don't want to say dumb it down because that is insulting, but it's very, like you said, it's gonna take more than one meeting to understand these tips. So if we do a presentation of this to the town, I think there's gonna be a lot of head scratching if they just really don't understand really what this is about. Maybe, I don't know if before the town meeting or whatever, there could be like a 15-minute, let's explain the TIF.
A crib sheet.
Yeah, like, and, or almost like, give them an example, whether it's real or hypothetical,
Sure. Absolutely.
of a to demonstrate how the process works.
Mhm.
And you could even use, this is how Pumpkin Town worked. You know, this is what we did, this is why it's a TIF district, you know, and the money that's coming from it. I just think this is definitely, if you're not an economics major, it's gonna be very difficult for somebody to understand and want to vote for the correct way.
Mhm.
But other than that, I think that my only other question is, in doing these TIF districts, we all know that South Berwick is a desirable place to live,
Mhm.
but is it a desirable place to do business? Have we been approached by contractors, developers, or any kind of entrepreneurs about, yes, make room for us, we want to be here? Has any of that occurred?
Let me answer that if I may. The answer is no. Now ask me,
What? What?
because your previous administration didn't sell the town. This was not on the doctrine. This was not economic development for the town, which is how we got to where we're at today. So one of the biggest things that we want to do with this is by doing, so me and Jen started, when I got here, we started talking to two businesses about wanting to come here. And they all asked the same question, do you have a TIF district? We didn't know, I didn't know any more about TIF districts than you probably do. So I hired the best person in the world who knows about TIF districts and said, at first I had her come in and talk to me and educate me on what it is. And basically in a nutshell, okay? Real quick, down and dirty, so the public understands it, is we lose 70 cents on every dollar to the state when we collect our taxes. That being said, what a TIF district does is if I'll use hypothetically, $100,000 in taxes out of the Pumpkin Town, when it was built, the Pumpkin Town district, okay? The tax evaluation, let's say it was 100,000, that stays the same as the base tax. So that every year, we collect $100,000 from Pumpkin Town, goes into the general fund account. Any new growth from that every year, so now let's say in year 2, it's 132,000 is their valuation. 100,000 goes into the general account, 32,000 goes into the TIF account that we can spend on these things we talked about.
Mhm.
Next year, say it grows to 150,000 evaluation. 100,000 goes in the general fund, 50,000 now goes into a TIF fund. And if we didn't spend 32,000, we now have 82,000 in TIF fund that we can spend on all these things that we listed. And so forth and so on for 30 years. And so the TIF fund allows us to capture that money back at 100%, spend it on us to help offset the general fund expenditures. So hypothetical, Denise said we could spend that TIF money on a fire truck or parts of it, okay? So now we go buy a new fire truck for $1 million, but we find out that we can spend 500,000 of that out of the TIF money. So we take that out of our savings account. Now the taxpayers only have to raise 500,000 for the new truck. We just saved essentially 500,000. That's the TIF amount down and dirty. And that's probably how we will kind of explain it. Because I didn't know, trust me, I knew less than you did on tests, and I've been doing this for 10 years. But she explained it to me, you know, and that's a down and dirty. We'll do that way. But back to your answer, so no, they weren't, that's why when I got here, and after I talked to Denise, that's why I was sitting on 1 point, how much in the TIF district money?
1.2.
1.2 million. It's been building for years. But when talking with Denise, so if we don't bring business to South Berwick, if we don't bring and add business to our tax base, then every new home that comes in is using the services and paying minimal tax dollars. Taxes are gonna go way up. And so there's no good community ever works out with just being a residential community. Residential with business base to help offset the residential taxes. More businesses we bring in, the better. So the answer to your question was no, they weren't doing it. They had no vision to do it. They weren't following the comprehensive plan. So that's why when you folks interviewed me, we talked about, and then I brought Denise with me, and is we had to have a change plan. And the plan is we've got to get economic development. We got to fix our roads, make them safer and better. And then we got to figure out how to bring business here the correct way. So that in 10 years from now, we're still not looking at just a residential community. Because by then, taxes will be so far through the roof, no one will want to live here.
Right.
So that's what this is all about. Now we brought Denise on, paid her salary out of that TIF money, $1.1 million we've already saved in 10 years. And said, create a TIF district, update the other one, and then sell the town, say we're open for business. Go attract business. Because like she had told me, she said, you know, all these conferences and all these things, all these towns, Hollowell and Westbrook and all these other places are saying, well, come to us, we got a TIF district. Who's there doing that for South Berwick? Nobody. So people aren't coming to South Berwick. What do they know South Berwick for? Traffic jams. So if we don't plan ahead and fix this with a comprehensive plan, economic development for business community development to control growth, we're gonna end up, if you think taxes are bad now, stand by and wait 10 years. And as I told the council, the plan here is to try to start doing that now, so that in 10 years it looks different. And that's one of the conversation you and I had that night about traffic. That's been the problem. What's the plan? We now have all these pieces of the plan, economic development, fixing the traffic piece. If we start molding these together, the new TIF districts, hopefully in 10 years, we look at this and go, wow, we revitalized downtown. We brought businesses down. It helped stabilize the building of stabilized taxes so that when people build new homes, it's not such a major impact, blah, 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 blah. If we don't have any plan to go forward, we're gonna end up in this same spot. People 10 years from now will be arguing about traffic, taxes are too high, and there's no relief.
And I think too, I totally appreciate your point, Melissa, because like I'm a very like numbers analytical person, and it still I'm still trying, like I don't know that I could explain it. Like I think I get it, but and I've heard it now many times. So I totally appreciate that. And I think from like a taxpayer perspective, from a resident perspective, I think trying to focus on like, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of people really what they care about most about is that they're getting the services that they expect from their town, and that their taxes are not going to go up, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the part of the story with this, is that by establishing these TIF districts, we are going to be doing any number of things, whether it's bringing in new business, whether it's offsetting some of our general fund stuff too, that could potentially lower taxes or keep them flat while enhancing what exists in town. And so like, for me as just a resident, like those are the things that I care about. And all this, you know, I think it's certainly important that we put all of this like more complicated detail out there for the public to consume. But I think it's important we have the onus to sort of tell that like high level story of like, this is what this means for you as a resident and how it impacts you.
Absolutely.
So if I could interject, I'll develop an executive summary that takes the highest points. I mean, Jen and I had worked on, I didn't want to complicate things. We worked on a formula that showed exactly like we had $1 million project. This is what it would cost you if you didn't have a TIF district to fund this program. And you'd flip when you start looking at that kind of number. then the public would sit there and go, why wouldn't we want it in a TIF district to do our sidewalk project out of TIF? Do you know what I'm saying? So I think to your point, and it's funny that you said dumb it down, because I think that might have been the exact words. But anyway, yeah, so I hear you. So point well taken.
I guess I'll take a shot. Like honestly, how I've been thinking about TIF districts is it's like my house. If I could TIF district my kitchen and not pay taxes for the, if I could make my kitchen a TIF district and not pay the town for the taxes and then redo my kitchen, I wouldn't have to pay for that extra piece essentially.
Basically,
And
Yeah.
so
Your
I'd be
added
paying
value.
for the rundown part of my house, but I'd be having an awesome kitchen that I'm not really paying taxes for.
With an oven that doesn't work.
Right, exactly. Things I wrote down, sidewalks, you mentioned sidewalks. So I'm out in Buttonwood, out in Aggie. There are sidewalks all through my neighborhoods that connect to Agamenticus Road, which connect to Main Street, which connect to downtown. So would my neighborhood potentially be seeing the benefit of this transportation because it connects to a hub, or is it like, come on, Jeff, we can only go so far here?
how about a hybrid answer? to that? So my hybrid answer is, depends how far we get the TIF district to go to. So if we get the TIF district to go as far up to Aggies, that's a whole different ballgame. If the TIF district ends, I don't know, maybe a Powderhouse, then that's a longer stretch, you know what I'm saying? So it depends on what the TIF district looks like. This is the other part of the answer, is that the more you put in a TIF district and that can get funded, then at least more in the general fund to fund things like neighborhoods that wouldn't be able to get funded. So if I'm paying like 100% of the sidewalks being done in a transit-oriented area or in the downtown, but you only have 300,000 in sidewalk money for 2 years, put it in Agamenticus, put it in the residential areas, put your capital expenditures that have no other way of being funded in the general fund, and 100% of what can be in the accumulated money in the TIF district. You follow where I'm coming from? So that's my hybrid answer. But we'll see how far we can get. I asked that question to the attorneys in the state. They said, you always ask stretchy questions.
Looking at the map also, it looks like some of the voids that I see, if I am reading the map correctly, it looks like the high school and the elementary school,
Mhm.
and probably Berwick Academy.
Yes.
How does that,
The reason is they're tax exempt, so
Okay.
there's no valuation benefit. I mean, I'll give you an example, like in Saco, for example, Sweetser was considering selling property, so we started adding it to the TIF district, because once you start, I'm not saying that Berwick's gonna sell it, but you can always add property later. Like, let's say Berwick Academy decides to sell 50, 60 acres.
Yeah.
Grab it, because it has an OAV of 0, and it could potentially grow to 2 million, depending on what's going in there, so you want to grab it.
Yeah.
So, but it makes no sense, and it's good to actually not put them in, because it inflates the size of a district that really doesn't need to be inflated.
Sure.
And then when it comes to tax and acreage valuation numbers, that affects the cap, not necessarily in a transit, but in a general economic development, it would affect the acreage cap, and so you don't want that. So. Oh, you'll see in the transit, if you drill down, because we have big, huge maps in the office, and you're welcome to come see them and show you exactly how we got to where we got. There are some that are tax exempt that we've kept in because they're on business corners. Maybe the church is not always going to be a church. Maybe the church will turn into a restaurant at some point. I mean, we don't know the answer to that question. So we're putting it in there because it has a 0 OAV.
okay, and then as far as ambulance, we're contracting ambulance services now. How does that work for us?
Mhm.
Where we don't, right now, I can say, go to the fire station, I can bring you to it, I can bring you to the police station, I can't bring you to the South Berwick ambulance hut. Like, how does that blend in for our future when you write it in, or is it fire and ambulance?
What we determined today after speaking with the attorney is that regardless of, who funds it or whatever, it can fund a prorated portion of operations out of this. So whatever that looks like.
Yeah.
So, in any community, and it can fund a portion of an ambulance purchase. I don't know how currently it's run. I don't know if you pay for a new ambulance purchase 100% us, or if it gets paid out of their finances, but we can pay for that prorated amount. Does that answer the question?
Thank you.
So like, could we pay for, to use those funds toward our contract with York Ambulance?
It's operating. Yeah, we can.
Oh, we can?
Yes.
I thought you
that
said
was-
operating, no.
No, we found out after we got off the phone and it said
Oh, okay.
operations, yeah.
Okay.
Prorated though. For the
Prorated.
district, yep. And then we said no because we thought the fire station was not in the district, but we determined it was in the district. So
Yeah,
it's hard to look at a little map and find all the parcels, but
And then the public hearing that we'll be addressing later in the meeting. It's a public hearing, so it's a public hearing, not a public vote, right? So it's like, this is the information we're trying to give as much information, but it really just comes down to whether the council wants it. So,
And
Okay.
they may have ideas. Some of the public, I've been to some public hearings that said, why is my property in it? I don't, and then once they understand it. And so people can add parcels. Somebody, I've seen at a meeting where somebody said, I'm putting my property on the market. In 6 months, we had no way of knowing, right? And so they wanted it in the TIF district.
Yeah.
So, and you can make all those changes. So when you have your motion before you, there'll be a general motion and not general, very specific motion, but it'll handle the general application. And it'll be stated in it, it's substantially as presented this evening. And then if you want to make amendments and you need to vote on an amendment to remove a parcel, add a parcel, whatever you need. Transit's less complicated when you get to the ones where you have decisions to make, like who you're funding, businesses that you're funding, credit enhancement agreements that are attached to a TIF. That's where it gets pretty complicated.
that was, you mentioned it, and I didn't take a note on credit enhancement agreement. My question here is, how is a TIF district marketable to businesses? Like,
So-
to me, it sounds great for the town, and I'm saying, do it. How is it? How are you getting X business? How can we sit here and say our tax rate could stay the same or go down because we're bringing in these businesses? How is the
How do we
TIF
market
district
a
marketed?
credit enhancement agreement? So when a business goes on a website, and by the way, Tim was right, nothing's been happening. I've been here 10 weeks now. Already have a 7,200 square foot building that wants to be placed in Pumpkin Town. He's already asking about a CEA. We'll talk about that in a minute. I don't want to predispose his plans or anything. I've already worked with 3 businesses, a couple in the downtown right now. So things are happening because now if you do economic development, it's on the website. People know that I'm here, working with 3 developers from the northern part of not northern Maine, that's where I grew up. I'm talking about north of here that are interested in some vacant land and building. So a credit enhancement agreement, when people know there's a TIF, developers, they know there's an ability to have a credit enhancement agreement. So the first thing they do when they come in is they ask me, where's the council at? Are they supportive of the credit enhancement agreement? I said, haven't talked about it yet, right? So we're not there. But they're interested in exploring that. So if you have a business coming in, it's a unique business, or somebody comes in and he wants a smaller building, he has 5 or 6 employees, but he's relocating his business from New Hampshire. That's the one that I'm meeting with right now. So that's kind of cool, bringing a New Hampshire business to me. And then another person, has talked about, building a larger facility, and another one, affordable housing unit. And so when these people come in, they want to know that they have the ability to get a credit enhancement agreement through a TIF. And so it's common language with developers. If you have a TIF, they're ahead of the game. Versus there are some communities where the developer chooses the city and then has to spend an entire year negotiating a TIF and a CEA. And that makes it problematic. They'll say, okay, I won't go to South Berwick. I'm going to go to Elliott, because Elliott has it or something.
And in layman's terms, if I'm a business owner, what does a credit enhancement do for me? What do I get from that?
So the credit enhancement agreement, so let's say I want to build a 50,000 square foot building. I want to bring in 40 new employees in a community. I need help. I'm going to have a tax bill of, goodness, I can't do the math that quickly, but let's just say their tax bill would be about 50,000 a year or 75,000 or whatever they're doing. They'll sit there and say, I'd like a credit enhancement agreement. So the council votes discusses an executive session with this developer, what would be an appropriate amount of money that you would want back. I've been in communities where they've negotiated as much as 75, 80% back. That's a lot. And some that have gone 50-50, and some that have had graduated tips. So your cash flow is highest when you're starting out. So you want to have, so that's when you probably give them 75% back, and then a couple more years you do 50%. But the key is, you don't want to give away the bank as a community, but you want to track them. And so what happens is, so let's say their bill is $50,000, and then you write them a 50% tip, they get 25,000 back. They will not get that money back until they pay their taxes. So they can't just get a check from us. So at the end of fiscal year, finance would cut them back a check for 50% of that. And then councils have been recommended as of late, because, you know, finances are tough, to actually set a cap. So you don't want to do the full 30 years or full 25 years at that amount. So you say, okay, when you reach a cap of, say, 600,000, we'll cut you off. You know, which is kind of cool, because then finance knows at the end of X amount of years, they're only going to get 600,000. So I've seen TIFs and reimbursements, one of them like $3 million and went up to 7 million. But what that person did is developed maybe 600 acres of an area in a community, brought in about 30 businesses and 20 sets of residential units. So what's 3 million to 7 million, right? When you're that long term.
And that would be after negotiations, it would either be capped or not.
Yep,
But at
exactly.
any rate, it's done after the
X
TIF
amount of
district is
Yes.
gone.
You can't write a CEA for longer than a district.
Okay.
And some businesses are smaller, like I've worked in communities where the TIF was only like 200,000 cap, but it meant the difference between that person locating in a community or going to the next door community, because there wasn't that
So
ability.
potentially, really what would be great is we get this TIF district, Lincoln Town, well, get this TIF district going, and we as a town are going to be looking and saying, holy mackerel, there's a lot of stuff happening here, because people are going to be,
Mhm,
it's going to be marketed, they'll be flocking here because they know they have a 30-year
mhm,
window, as opposed to Lincoln Town, you're just working with 18.
Precisely. Precisely.
Okay, so, yeah, I could hear a lot of people in town saying, oh my gosh, our town is changing. Whoa, hold on. But that's really what it's designed to do.
Mhm. And the neat thing is, look at your downtown. You're not gonna get big business in the downtown. It's not gonna happen. You don't even have room for infill, you know, which is basically filling all the vacant spots. You don't have room for it. 236, the wild south. You know, I mean, there's plenty of room and opportunities, so. So anyway,
I have one more, but I don't want to.
I just have one more question. I'm thinking about like, do we offer these people who are on this route who may be impacted, like, do they need to be notified, special date, like a planning board? I don't know. I'm just thinking of my neighbors and they're brand new to town and they would potentially be involved in this.
Right.
And, what kind of that communication needs to look like from us.
so the short answer is there's no impact to them. And number one, number two, the public hearing notification will be all over the website. And, you know, there have been communities where people have called and asked questions, but other than being on a map, it really has no impact. In fact, if you wanted to communicate anything, you say, you know, your $10,000 taxes on your beautiful home is 100%. The new stuff is going to stay here, right? If your tax bill goes up by $2,000 next year, you can thank the town for keeping that 2,000 locally, instead of saying, no, we're going to give 70% away and we're going to keep 30%. So, I mean, that's messaging that we can do for marketing. But back to the cheat sheet, then I think that would be something to say. So even if you're residents in this location, it means absolutely nothing other than any of your increased tax bills will 100% stay here.
But so this is a good question, because like along this entire path, you know, if I'm a resident that lives along that path, yes, like this doesn't have any impact to me from like a tax perspective, but if this lot next to me is now built up with a business, you know, like this is basically opening the door for more of that. And then, but when that process happens, there'll be like a whole butter notification and stuff for
Yes.
whomever, yeah. So that will come later, but there's no, in terms of establishing.
Keep
a
in
TIF
mind,
district.
most of Route 236 is residential.
Yeah.
So a lot of this is going to be conditional
Mhm.
use, and it's also going to need the planning board approval.
Mhm.
And it's not like you're gonna have, you know, big, huge businesses. But for example, if you wanted to attract a Hannaford along there, is there an appropriate spot where there aren't any residences
Mhm.
right nearby, you know? So, yeah.
And then, we also, okay. You mentioned a little bit about sort of piggybacking. I think it's really, this map is really great because I can see what, like the fire station, you just got that in there. It's like you just snatched the corner of that, so it took up the whole property. As we're, you know, once you get down to,
That's Berwick Academy, maybe.
well, once you get down, like what, 91 area, you start heading up 91, and then you start heading down Wichita, you're out in our R5 zone. You're talking about sort of what I consider our fragile parts of town. What do we need to think about to protect? While I'm all for development, I also don't personally want to all of a sudden see a industrial park creeping up at the end of Wichita Road, you know, and that's the type of things that I'm concerned about. I look at this and I say, okay, this is the area here for this, but if there's ways that development can creep past that.
So the answer to that is, and then, you know, Tammy, you know, our new planner, and I've been talking, and your zoning ordinance, site plan review, I mean, that's where that happens.
Okay.
You just, we're going to be working on a rewrite. We thought at first like several amendments, but once we started working with this business owner, we realized rewrite is probably in the cards. And so that's where you do your zoning, and you have your public hearings on the zoning sections, and you basically articulate where you want the development, where you don't. It doesn't make sense to have it in the middle of nowhere. I mean, there isn't a business that would want to locate in the middle of nowhere anyway. They want to be in proximity to easy access, easy highways, easy on-off turnpikes. So there's a lot to it, but the TIF, what I don't want people to do is get confused that TIFs have nothing to do with zoning.
Okay.
All they do is attract people because we now have protected status, that's all.
All your business, nothing, this doesn't change any of the land use. This only, like she said, this is just a financial attraction to say, come look at our town where we can put business. We're open for business.
Okay.
This doesn't change land use ordinances. This doesn't change R5 to make it an industrial park here. None of that stuff. This is, they're two separate worlds.
Okay.
So TIF is just basically a financial attraction thing to get them here. Land use and zoning is what controls where it's gonna be. The planning board, they still have to go through permits and all that stuff in the permitting process and blah, blah, blah. all that. So nothing changes there. So if people are, wow, wait a minute, you know, you're gonna be building a Hannaford out on Belmarsh Road. Nope, that would never happen in an eternity. It can't. It'd have to go through the planning board. Well, you know, could you build more houses out there? Sure you could. But if you're gonna have a Hannaford, it would have, like Denise said, it'd have to be in a, it would have to be in one of the zones in the zone for. And if that zone's in a TIF district, then it makes it a better financial enhancement for Hannaford to look at.
Okay.
So remember, one of the things we gotta look at, and I wanna make sure that we get the message right. Well, 1985, Barbara, you probably remember, there was a trash energy plant that was trying to come here. 1985,
No, it was in the 90s.
90s, it was a trash energy plant, and it got it finally got, it never got past the planning. board. But if they brought that here, if they brought that trash energy plant, put it in an industrial park, you know, whether a trash energy plant fits, but let's call it whatever it was, balloon making factory, whatever it could be. But today, what would that be 20 years later? If they started out with 35 employees, that probably would be 100 employees today. And what would that be for our tax base? But it's not here. It went somewhere else. So if they're building in Somersworth and they're building in Dover and they're building in Elliott and Berwick and Sanford and North Berwick, we ask that question, well, why aren't we building in South Berwick? And why aren't we getting the benefits of a 200-unit apartment building in South Berwick somewhere? You know, it's zoned, it's controlled where it's gonna go. That's why you have the planning board and all the zoning stuff. But that helps the tax base. We're not getting it. So then people go, oh, my taxes drop. You're right. You haven't done anything in 20 years, except building homes. What would you like me to tell you? Your taxes are gonna keep going higher. And so there's only, in the municipal government world, there's only a couple options, right? I can't sell more widgets. I don't sell widgets. So if people want their taxes to go up, we either have to bring in business and attract business to help offset that huge amount, or reduce services. And I guarantee, you go tell people that, you know, let's cut Wednesday out of the transfer station thing and see what happens
Not plow the
next.
roads.
Yeah, not plow the roads, you know, so I just, you know, we're just trying to figure out a way to bring growth here, but control growth. So it doesn't change the attire of our town, the village aspect, you know, we want to keep our little, you know, we want to keep the cosmetic of the town.
Excellent. Sorry, and it's easy to like go from the development part and then slip or think about the financial, because the finances sounds great to me. And then I start thinking about the other stuff but they're two different things.
But that's a good point to bring out, because see, we get wrapped up in exactly what you're talking about, Melissa. We get wrapped up in all this. We learn out of the, you know, the caps and the, you know, facade program. We need you folks to tell us that's why we're talking. Well, will they be able to build a Hannaford in like the backyard in Aggie? No, it doesn't affect, and that's what we're gonna make sure that we give the message out. The TIF district doesn't affect land use, zoning ordinances, codes, all those things. This is, right, so we gotta make sure we deliver that message.
The other piece is for every neighborhood that doesn't want a business, there isn't a business that wants to be in that neighborhood. It's a two-way street. They really don't want to be a bad neighbor. They want to be successful.
Yeah.
They're not going to want to have like 16, 18 wheelers coming in every single day, driving through a residential neighborhood. It's going to be an impact to them and impact to the neighborhood. And so there's a lot of moving parts.
Excellent. Anything else from the council?
Thanks, Denise. This is great.
Yeah, thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much. It was excellent.
Email, call, any questions. Anytime.
Yes, all right, next up, public comments. Anybody from the public have anything not on the agenda?
I have a question before you leave, if that's possible.
Is it open for public conversation on presentations and correspondence?
You can allow it if you want as a chair. She had her hand up before. Denise
Oh, we
finished
can
her
say.
presentation.
Go ahead,
Sorry.
just say your name and
Yep, Chris Bernier, 404 Main Street. I have two quick questions about the TIF. You said the properties inside the TIF are not going to be affected. Will it affect the property value at all? No, so it has nothing to do with it. Nope. Are those credit enhancements transferable?
You can write them that way. It's not common.
Not common, okay. That's it.
Usually when the person sells the business, it's the end of the TIF district.
Okay,
But it depends, like, let's say, it's,
Depends on how it's written.
well, yeah, and if the ownership goes from, it's a family company, and it goes from father to son, or, you know, brother, or whatever.
I just wondered if it stayed with the actual location or if it went.
It's the business.
Corporation itself, so it's an agreement with the corporation or
Correct.
proprietor. Okay, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
thanks a lot, Denise.
You're welcome.
All right, any other public comments from people on Zoom? And anyone here? All right. New business, appointment to the planning board. So here we have an application from Christine Junior.
Yeah.
I think we just met you, right?
Either way.
How you doing?
I'm doing well.
Thanks for coming in. So we've started doing just our little interviews in public session. We used to do them in executive session, but here kind of works out this way. And I'm at a loss at how we really organize it.
This is usually very informal, but, you know,
Whatever you need to know.
thank you for your application. We have alternate positions open. So I think like first and foremost, meetings are first and third Wednesdays of the month at 6:30, and the planning board meets here, right? So that's kind of like the schedule. So, you know, does that time commitment work for you?
Yep.
And then periodically there'll be workshops with the council. Like we have one coming up next week where we try to put our heads together on different stuff. So those are the logistics. I think from a process standpoint, you know, I'm sort of stealing what Jack used to always say in these interviews, but like, you know, the planning board's role is to basically take our zoning ordinance and take applications and see if the two square up and measure up. Like that's the real focus of the planning board as far as like regular business, I guess. But there's seems to be an awful lot of work lately on developing new ordinance as well.
I noticed.
Yeah, there's a lot going on there, so,
That's kind of what attracted my attention.
yeah. You used to
Yes.
relish.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. I knew
I thought
that.
you'd recognize me eventually.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm not in the chef's coat and pinstripes.
Yes, yeah, you look a little different now. Yeah, I think that's it. Anything?
I just really want to like say thank you to, you know, filling alternate seats. It's non-voting unless there's not folks that are in attendance, but you know, it's important work. It's important work that people pay attention to and, you know, I'm just thankful. So.
Well, thank you for taking up the application. I just wanted to say that, you know, I own 2 businesses in town. And the first one was in '03, and the landscape has changed a lot, and I think for the better, especially the way the councils are being run and the way the planning board's been handling business, and I'm thrilled to be a part of it if I can be. I'm not currently working, so I have a little bit more time to offer, and I felt like I've been in front of the planning board at least 2 times in the last 15 years, and I've taken up time from them, and I've taken up time from the council. And it's time to kind of pay it forward when I have time to do that. And I know a lot of people they just don't have the time commitment. So yeah, I have the time now. I'm not employed in the evenings. And I've always kind of wanted to get in there and get into those ordinances. Really, I know, it's exciting. And listening to this tonight was the best thing for me. Because yesterday I was sitting there thinking, if you asked me, what do I see for South of Berwick? You just heard it all. Literally, it was amazing. I'm so glad I was here for the tip explanation. And also to listen to the town manager's version of it. But no, this all sounds great. And the town's in big hands, I think.
Thank you.
Melissa, did you have any questions or anything?
You kind of touched on it a little bit, but I was just wondering, what's your motivation for?
My motivation is that I think I'm going to be living on Lower Main Street. And it's a very kind of complex mixed use part of the world to live in. And I think if you live down there or you've been a business person in town, you've already been through the land use table and you've already been through the ordinances. And you've already been in front of the planning board. And part of it is very personal. It's sometimes wonderful to live down there. And other times it's kind of confusing with the way the uses are mixed. And it'd be nice to sort of know what's going on. Like for my own self, to know what's going on and what direction the town's going in. So I have that vested interest. And also when I owned a business, it just didn't seem right to be owning a restaurant, be open to the public and listening to people talking about politics all the time. And in any way be involved. with the planning board. So this has given me an opportunity now to maybe be a little more active. And I think I've always had opinions about that little downtown we call our village. It's a very problematic space in the mixed use, but also has so many positive things about that that can come out of it. It just has to be handled with sort of neighborly respect. And that's something that I would like to bring to the planning board, you know, the perspective of somebody that's not just a business owner, but somebody's already literally done it right there. And one of the things I'm really looking forward to is maybe getting out there, and I thought I was doing this as a business owner, get people to reuse the buildings down there in B1. Compact uses, using the existing structures without changing the landscape or the historic character of the neighborhood, but managing to keep it vital, much in the same way it was 100 years ago down there. You know, people working and living in the same village, to me, that's part of why I moved to South Berwick. I thought it was idyllic. And I shouldn't mention the parking because that's the non-idyllic part, but also the traffic. So if that ever gets resolved, that's just, this town will be, it's already great, but it would be so much better. On the way down here, I stopped at the store and I saw a man almost get hit crossing the street, which I'm sure we've all seen, and then it turned into an altercation between him and the other driver. And I'm laughing, but I just said to my partner on the way down, how many car doors have you seen ripped off? And how many accidents have you seen? So we all know about the parking thing. We all know about traffic. I personally have had my own parked car totaled on Lower Main Street. So we have some significant issues with traffic and speeding and parking. So I'm willing to get in there and give you my firsthand experience of living right there.
On those couple of topics, just so I know you haven't been at our meetings and stuff recently, but we have a lot of work going on.
Yeah, the traffic study.
Yeah, the traffic study, and kind of plans to do something about it. And then also, Tim and the staff proposed taking a look at all of our parking ordinances
Oh, yeah.
recently, and kind of
this-
shoring those up
I
too.
listened to the last meeting and I couldn't have agreed more with
Good.
him. The uneven enforcement of ordinance has been an issue for me since I opened my first business. It never understood. And then I got to know people that have lived in town for many generations, and they would say things like, well, you're not a townie. And then I'd say, you're not gonna attract business to a town if people don't feel like there's a level playing field. And also if the rules are so opaque that nobody understands them as far as opening a business, and it's changed so much, it's so much better. But yeah, when I first moved here, everybody talked about the fact that, you know, there had been a possibility of a bypass, a traffic bypass, and that they had decided not to go with it. And I was really disappointed about that, but I, for years, asked people that were here in town then, what was your logic to not accepting that? And their logic was they thought that the traffic count was the lifeblood of their businesses. So you have to, I mean, you really have to listen to other people's, obviously, other people's opinions and their experiences. I don't agree with them. The bypass would have been wonderful. I want this village to be walkable and safe. And I think that the tips are a great idea and all of this is wonderful. But if you can't address that, the traffic downtown, it's just, that's the problem. And I
Jess,
don't-
did you have any other questions? Mallory, any other questions?
Not a question, but well, maybe more so for Tim. So we passed the training thing last week.
Oh, yeah.
So I think someone from the staff will be in touch after we appoint you, which we haven't done yet, but with information about a planning board training session facilitated by MMA, right?
I'll be going to the planning board with that whole.
Is that after the first of the year?
Within 6 months or something like that.
Well, you can do it in 6 months, but it's on, yeah, they hold
They hold it pretty.
classes
Oh, it's available.
every couple of months. And I think after the first year, it's gonna be a podcast, well, not a podcast, but a Zoom meeting thing.
Okay.
Melissa, you have anything else?
Just a final comment. Your resume is very impressive, first and foremost. And I would just like to say that I really appreciate when somebody wants to be part of something where the shoe has been on the other foot. So with knowing that you have had to go in front of the planning board and now you want to be a part of the planning board, I think you would definitely have a certain level of empathy for people, that do go in front of the board.
I almost cringe when I watch the video sometimes.
Sure,
I mean, it's not an easy thing to do.
right.
Yeah, it's a big risk opening business.
How are you with holding your temper?
I don't have much of a temper. I can be passionate about things, but respectful.
Fair enough.
I think the only thing is, just, I feel like at my MMA training, the alternates are active members all the time. They're just not voting members all the time. That's correct, right?
Correct.
Yep, unless one of the full-time members is absent.
Right.
Which is why they remain active.
So I think that's a crucial part as we've now gotten a full board, and being an alternate it's not a part-time gig. You're still part of that full-time and just not doing the voting unless it's needed. Like if
I
someone,
agree, otherwise you'd be stepping on a moving train if you had to show up at the board.
absolutely. So, and then I'll also, having been on the planning board, one of, honestly, I'm very excited that you've applied. And one of my things might not be the nicest thing to say. I don't want warm bodies sitting on our council or on our planning boards and stuff like that. But I also would caution, just the planning board is one of those roles that you're just the rule keeper. As far as actual action, like making things more restrictive, not necessarily in your purview.
Mhm.
It would be, what does this say?
Mhm.
And can you work within that black and white?
Sure.
So that's what I would recommend for you as you begin, really dive into that training, because they're gonna say the same thing.
Mhm.
Just to kind of keep everybody, it's very frustrating at times too, because you are passionate about your area, you're passionate about the town.
Mhm.
And sometimes in this position,
Mhm.
that passion has to kind of get pushed aside because the black and white says, yes, you can do it. And
Absolutely.
that's a hard part of the position, I thought. So,
I would say that the chairman does a great job watching him.
yeah,
Yeah,
Yes.
he's a good example, and I downloaded a copy of the planning board bylaws. So I kind of made myself
Fantastic.
aware of the behavior that's expected, and I dusted off my Robert's rule.
It's
So old.
Well, I will go ahead and offer up a motion to appoint Chris Prunier to our planning board as an alternate seat with a term expiring on June 30th, 2023.
I'll second.
And just to add a discussion point to that, that this is filling an existing alternate term, hence the kind of short
That's right.
expiration date in June. So then every June we take up kind of all the expiring terms and, renew them if we feel like you guys are doing a good job and you want to continue. So
Right. Thank you for
Excellent.
explaining that.
all right, we have a motion and a second. Any other discussion? Great, we'll take a vote. Melissa,
Aye.
Jess,
Aye.
Mallory, and I'm an aye. Welcome aboard.
Thank you.
Thank you
Appreciate
so
your
much
time.
for your application. And thanks for staying for the whole meeting.
Oh,
Yes, thank you.
that was really interesting.
Good.
Public hearing. New business number 2, setting a public hearing date for the TIFs.
I will go ahead and offer up a motion to set a public hearing for December 27th, 2022 at 6 p.m. To receive public comments on the proposed amended and restated Punkintown Road and CMP corridor omnibus municipal development and tax increment financing district and development program pursuant to 30A section 5226 of the Maine revised statutes as amended.
If I may, Mr. Vice Chair, could we please include a location in public hearing?
I would like to add to my motion that public hearing will occur here at the police station at 6 p.m. Thanks, Barbara.
Second.
Motion in a second. Any other discussion?
I just had a quick
Yeah.
question. I'm sorry, why, Mallory, you brought up the fact of December 27th was holiday, might be an inconvenience or might not. What was the reason for, was it a deadline of some sort? I kind of,
So first of all, we have a standing meeting on the 27th. We'll have a regular council meeting that day anyway.
oh, okay.
But in order to, because this is, and keep me honest, Jen, this, there's, with all of these things, there's always this like, okay, and then we have to work backwards to make sure we're hitting all these timelines, 2 weeks since, or whatever it is, to have a public hearing before this date, before that date. So after the staff kind of worked backward to figure out that date, and I imagine you guys probably worked backward from our budgeting timeline to make sure that, because this is the TIF districts will be a big piece for our budget processes, which will kick off like February timeframe. So we want to make sure we have that information ahead of time. And when you do all that working backwards,
And
that's the time.
all of this has to be done before we send it up to the state, but that's final approval.
Okay,
And so the state, so right now, if we apply in late January, we should come out by the end of February, 1st of March. If we didn't apply till February, so if we didn't have the public hearing till January, then you wouldn't be able to apply till February. It wouldn't come out till till early March. And if there's a blip in the state, God knows the state has blips, then that could be April, then it would be, we wouldn't be able to use the TIF stuff till next year.
okay,
So by getting in on the 27th, if I can get everything done, that means the first business day in January, we're gonna send the TIF to the state. And we'll be at the top, because we're not the only ones doing this. Every other district in the town and the state that wants TIFs or cities are trying to get them in, get them approved for this cycle. We want to be at the top of the pile, not the bottom of the pile, so that they're not dragging their feet trying to approve our TIF in March, and we're still waiting. And we're going to budget, we can't implement it. So that's why it's a time thing.
and to my understanding, there is a lot of grants and funding that are available, and like you just said, Tim, with a lot of municipalities applying for these TIF districts. If we don't do this sooner rather than later, then we might miss the boat on some of this funding. If
Well,
we,
right, so we can't, so the TIF district allows us to get, well, the TIF district, kind of like a process start, it opens the book. And then with the TIF district allows us to get a downtown revitalization plan. And if we don't have the TIF district plan and downtown revitalization plan, when you apply for all these grants for infrastructure grants and funding grants, whatever, the sidewalk grants, building renovation grants, whatever it is, they'll always ask you, do you have TIF districts and plans? And if you have no, a lot of times your application gets cast out.
right,
Because
okay,
they don't want to give, they're not gonna give money to people who have no plans and no organization and no future. Because that's wasting money.
right,
So that's why we're doing all this, is that there's millions and millions of dollars available for infrastructure costs, for sidewalks and all kinds of things, parks and whatever it is, roads. But we can't get any of it because we need the TIF districts and the plans to do it. Yeah, so it's all tied into future, it's all future planning. It's municipal planning. Without any of this, we're just sitting here with our heads in the ground, ostracizing our problems, wondering why our taxes go up. So,
Good.
Good.
Okay. Motion second, everybody clear on?
Mhm.
All right, we'll take a vote. Melissa,
aye,
Jess,
Aye.
Mallory?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 4-0.
I'll make a second motion to set a public hearing on December 27th, 2022 at 6:15 PM here at the police station to receive public comments on the proposed South Berwick transit-oriented omnibus municipal development and tax increment financing district and development program pursuant to 30A, section 5226 of the Maine revised statutes as amended.
I'll second. Motion second. Any other discussion? Take a vote. Melissa,
aye.
Jess?
Aye.
Mallory?
Aye.
And I'm an aye. Motion passes 4-0. Town ministers report?
I'm just gonna interrupt really quickly. If I need to leave at 8:25 in case things run over, so if I duck out around then. I'll just-
The highway department is on the summer break. That's right, I just wanted to see who's paying attention. Thank you. Highway's getting ready for winter, obviously. Terry, who's part of the janitorial staff as well as the outside maintenance crew, Terry Willie.
Yes, that's correct.
She took her CDL test so she can plow, and she passed it last Friday, so congratulations to her, great job. Police department in the last 2 weeks has had 11 arrests, 16 accidents, 96 traffic stops, which 24 on Portland Street. They're working on getting the electronic sign out front here. The sign's been ordered, they dug the trench for the electrical by the highway department. And it'll hopefully be up in place and running within a few weeks, which will be able to advertise our meetings here and whatever else. Chief Lieutenant and Detective Sergeant, which is the command staff, all responded to the school shooting hoax in Sanford last week. They also attended the critical incident tactical meeting at Kmart High School to discuss the incident afterwards. Chief brought some of that information to us. It was a tragic, it wasn't, a real tragedy, but it was tragic for the parents, I'm sure, who had to go through that, deal with that. However, the good side was Sanford's plan, which you had asked about, our plan models, we took it from Sanford's plan. And the good thing is now we all know Sanford's plans work, their plan actually does work. So that was a good thing. The fire department last 2 weeks had 11 calls year to date. They're at 373, which is right about where their average they should be. They're working on updating their policies and procedures with the committee. And they've been doing some cleaning of the station and rearranging some of the office space so that they have more office space and utilize the space better. Code enforcement in the past 2 weeks has done 2 building permits, 15 building inspections, 4 plumbing permits, and working on a new ordinance for enforcement actions for trash, metal, etc. Planning, the Great Hills Road 5-lot subdivision is up for final approval is granted on a 4-lot subdivision connected to public water, so 1 lot wasn't approved. Site plan amendment for project approved for 2021. I guess, okay, I'm not sure what that means.
That site plan amendment for a project that was approved in 2021.
Okay, approval granted for 110 Wally Road Water District for an increase in fencing area due to a large area need for replacement of communication tower. There's a site plan amendment for Hexagon Solar Array of Junction Road for an additional cement pad as a requirement of CMP to create a close connection point. LD 2003 meeting with legislative and Paul Schumacher, SMPDC, regarding a possible delay of enactment, which is what Tiffany was talking about. The state does not have the protocols in place yet, no guidance on the municipalities. It was supposed to be in effect by June 30th. And so it looks like it's going to be held off. The library, working on putting a new advisory board in place. 1 member has retired, 2 are getting ready to retire. There are currently 3 people in line for positions. Friends of the library have a calendar year budget season, currently going over the end of the year spending and looking at purchasing new DVDs and new shelves for the library. Recreation. Powderhouse engine, the Powderhouse Hill, the engine that runs it, is having issues, and the electrician found out the wiring is frayed due to age. It was repaired and currently running, but the whole system will need to be reviewed and hopefully will be repaired this next summer. Ski program bus trips going to cost $1,800 a trip this year. So Nikki is looking into options. This may be the last year for the program because of the cost of these increases, if we can't find an alternative. And she's working on updating the building and field policies and agreements for rentals for the ball fields. The seniors had their share tribute show last week, on Thursday. Bus was full and they had a great time yesterday. They had their Thanksgiving lunch at noon. The Rotary did the cooking. Assessing is working on property tax stabilization applications. We've had 282 applications to date. The deadline is 12/1, then she'll go down through and decide who meets the criteria and mail out the letters around mid-December. She's analyzing the sales for turnaround document and still working on GIS mapping. Town clerk's got lots of paperwork to do and that entry for the state after voting day, correct?
Yes.
Transfer station has been busy on weekends, economic development. With Jeff, meeting, she met with the Flynn's, who's the owner of the restaurant beside us and the golf course today. She's working on grant research to help the department heads for next year's budget. Nope.
I have a meeting set up with a solar farm sales person. He reached out to me. He's saying that the town could possibly save 10 to 15% on our CMP bills. So I have set up a meeting to him to see what he has to offer. It will fit into what we have. Yesterday morning, I received my 2 final entries from our auditor. So he is finalizing our financials. And as you know, he'll be here December 27th to present the audit to you folks. I was also approached by Mr. Fox, who does composting here in town. And I put a little thing on the South Park Bulletin to see if people are interested. I've had some people answer. Some people are concerned about certain things, but we're just kind of getting feelers out there. Don also,
Community composting.
yeah, so they would be a bin. It only costs $86 a month. He would come empty it weekly. But we wanted to see if there was interest out there. To see if people want to save certain scraps, keep it separate from the other trash, which in turn could also save, because we're charged on our hauling rate a bit once we get there by the tonnage. So we can compost, it'll help reduce our carbon footprint and whatnot. So I'm just kind of reaching out to the community, see if there's an interest, see if it would be used. So trying to save money how we can.
So that would be like $86 a month for the town to
Yes.
get rid of whatever is collected.
Yep. Just to have his bin there and have it available for the residents.
Got it.
And if people use it, we probably easily triple our savings
On the tonnage rate
on the tonnage rate.
being hauled away.
Easy.
Is that for one barrel?
Yes. So it depends on how much it would get used, right? I mean, if people were bringing it and they needed more. We reached out to Elliott and Kittery and Northbrook, reached out to all the surrounding towns. I forget which one I won, if it was Kittery or Elliott. They had to get a second bin almost within a month of putting it out there for their residents. So we'd have to see what the usage is.
But right now, you're just gauging interest,
Yes,
and then we develop it more as far as the details.
right. We didn't maybe reach out to the public with the redemption center with the cans, and that didn't go very well. So we thought maybe reaching out to the public and getting a little more response prior to trying something new
Yeah.
might have a little better response rate.
So, right, because what happens is they put food waste goes into household trash, gets thrown into the dumpster and gets included in our tonnage. You know, food waste is wet, it's moist, it's heavy, and, so when you plop a can of, Chef Boyardee that you didn't use half of it and dump it in the trash, well, that all goes in, and if we can do that, and take some of that out of the household waste, I'll say it's-
I don't know if Mr. Fox wants Chef Boyardee in his compost.
He said any food.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Brett from Liberty Street was very nice enough to put a link to his website to see what was, it could be brought over, so.
I think we should get it for free because he's gonna turn around and sell that compost and make money.
Yeah.
Yeah, who's take like Northwoods or if there's other local services, like, so it's like we need to search for other people who are. doing
And I
this type
think-
of thing.
The reason why he's charging is because we don't have to put our staff, we don't have to get any more staff. He's gonna come manage it, he's gonna take care of it, he's gonna do all the composting business. We don't have our staff utilize their time or have to hire someone else. We can't
And
hire
it
someone.
reduces our tonnage,
And it reduces our tonnage,
which is a huge expense.
exactly.
Yeah, be interesting to hear how it develops. Thank you.
I was
We should-
very, 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 very disappointed to find out that you can't put body parts in a compost. Just saying. Just saying. Okay, for admin, we've already started the budget process. We've been working, projecting out, budget process, we have to project out about 18 months. We've already started doing research on longevity of fuel costs. CMP is projected to go up again 24% starting the first of the year. Propane is still looking at going up, so we're looking at utility and fixed costs. Obviously, LD 290 concern. The town hall elevator is starting to show signs of failing again. We're in hopes of the replacement part, which is now being refurbished somewhere in China, will be back in the United States when we need it. We hope. We don't know. That could take a year, 2 years. And if the elevator goes out, there's not another part anywhere in the United States. The elevator, if that part breaks, the only other part we have is it's over in China getting repaired, so the elevator will be down, unfortunately. We met with, they're gonna be having Saturday, Christmas parade?
Yep.
Saturday is a Christmas parade going from Academy Street
Yes, lineup starts at 1:30 on Academy Street.
and it
it
goes
takes
down
off.
Main Street. And so this normally should have gone through the council and been approved. However, I didn't get notified until a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago they were doing it. So not enough time to, there's not enough time to get it on the agenda and do this.
I don't remember ever doing it before.
Never did it. before.
Oh, okay, so this is a thing where we weren't doing it. very much.
Right, we weren't doing parade and we should be doing parade.
Okay.
That's a policy change after the first of the year. So they should have done it, but I'll go talk to them and explain to them, but I'm not gonna cancel the holiday parade just for.
Yeah.
Because I'll just notify DOT what it is and assume that because you got done in all these years. we'll do it. We met with York Animals today on potential proposed cost changes for the future operational cost plans. And I will put that on the agenda for the next meeting. Happy Thanksgiving to everyone. That's all I got.
All right, council member comments, Mallory?
Happy Thanksgiving, and just want to put a plug in, Thursday, December 1st, Friday, December 2nd, and then the following weekend, I think it's the 9th and the 10th, is the Marshwood performance of Shrek. They usually put on a good show. It's kids third grade through 12th grade. My daughter's in it. Should be fun. Go see it.
Jess?
I loved that I received an email today from Southborough Recreation with the winter catalog. I thought it was fantastic, super consolidated, easy to use. And I love that I could get it into my inbox. I am very thankful just to live in this community and for all the volunteers that are out there doing the good work, not only for the town, but also for community endeavors. This upcoming, next Friday, so it's December 2nd, is Home for the Holidays downtown. We've been busy preparing and really looking forward to it. So if you check, we're front page of the Weekly Sentinel this week, so it should be, hopefully it's a good turnout. And also my church's penny sale, which is a parish comprising of Berwick's and Lebanon, is this Saturday at Noble Middle School.
I just wanted to let everyone know that there is 5 members of our Marshwood Summersworth Marching Band that will be performing in the Macy's Day Parade.
Oh,
So,
really? Wow.
yeah, so I know there's a link on the computer somewhere that it says exactly when they're going to be marching. So you don't have to watch the whole parade if you don't want to. And then also a shout out to the Marshwood football team who won the sportsmanship banner this year for their season. And just a friendly reminder, where we're on the holiday season, I encourage everybody to shop local this year. There's a lot of shenanigans that are going around with package deliveries and mailboxes getting robbed and all that fun stuff. So if we shop locally, we won't have to worry about that. And happy Thanksgiving to everybody.
Great. And I don't have anything, just happy Thanksgiving and thank you all for the work that you've been doing and glad to be a part of it. So that's it.
Motion to adjourn? Okay.
Take a vote.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much.
Jen, is there anything else you need us to sign?
Nope, that's it for
All
today.
right.
Let's go. He's out cutting that ear off.
No, my boys were cut it up and
Good.
they were
See you.
at school.
Sorry,
right now.
guys. Happy Thanksgiving.